And welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Ryan Nobles, in today for Chuck Todd. Earlier today, the House Ways and Means Committee made public 6 years of former President Donald Trump's tax returns. The release comes more than a week after the committee voted to make the returns public and more than 3 years after House Democrats started the effort to obtain the former president's financial documents. The returns show that Trump paid relatively little in federal taxes in the years before and during his presidency, including just $750 in 2017. And he paid no taxes in 2020, his last full year in office, and that he and then First Lady Melania made no charitable contributions that year. Earlier today, I spoke to House Ways and Means Committee member Lloyd Doggett about the tax returns.
It's outrageous both with regard to Trump personally and with regard to Trump's Internal Revenue Service administration. Here is the most powerful man in the world, the self-described clever genius who brags of his wealth almost daily, and he did not pay the taxes that the most modest wage earner in this country would pay.
Trump released a statement in response to today's development saying, in part, quote, "The Democrats should have never done it. The Supreme Court should have never approved it, and it's going to lead to horrible things for so many people. The great USA divide will now grow far worse." The release of Trump's tax returns today comes as Republicans are set to take control of the House of Representatives next week, and as the party must now confront the reality of governing with a slim majority, as well as the question of whether former President Trump's ongoing issues make him too toxic to be the party's standard bearer in 2024. And joining me now to talk more about this, NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake and Charlie Savage, a Washington correspondent for the New York Times and an NBC contributor. So, Garrett, let's start with you. You're poring over these documents. You've got a piece tonight on NBC Nightly News. You know, what have you found? What are the highlights from this release?
To me, the two most interesting things after the top lines are the charitable contributions, which you touched on, which are significant in some years and then drop off entirely in 2020. And Trump has a long history of saying he has made charitable contributions without the receipts to back them up. Here, there are not receipts provided in this in the most literal sense here either. And of course, remember, this is someone who had pledged to donate his entire salary during the length of time that he's president. You should see that number reflected in 2020, and you don't. The other thing that's interesting to me are the foreign business entanglements. In 2020 alone, the former president made $78 million from 15 different countries. Now, not from those governments necessarily, but from business ventures in those countries. And these are countries where there was big, geopolitical issues going on. China, Qatar, Turkey. Obviously, he still ended up in the negative on that year, but those are major sources of income for the former president during his time in office. All of that merits further exploration and further reporting.
All right, Charlie, let's turn to you now. What are your big reactions, and what do you think, outside of what Garrett has said, that are revelatory from these tax returns today?
Well, I'd echo that it's striking that he reported making no charitable donations in 2020 at all, not even his own salary, which he had publicly pledged he would donate back to taxpayers. So that's another apparent broken promise from Trump. The very little amount that he paid, zero in 2020 in terms of taxable income taxes that year, $750 in 2017, also is quite at odds with the public image that he's projecting. The larger picture, I think, secondary to this is still the revelation from last week that he was not audited by the IRS in the first 2 years of his presidency, despite a rule mandating audits of presidents. Only started in the first audit of a tax return he filed as president in 2019, when Democrats took over the House and first asked about what audit was happening. And then that very same day, the IRS gets around to opening the first one, which is still not done today. And we know as well that Obama was audited all 8 years. Biden has already been audited twice. So something special was happening for Trump inside the IRS. A lot of unanswered questions about that remain.
And Garrett, let's talk about the reaction from lawmakers now. I mean, how are Republicans responding to the Democrats' move to try to make all of this information public?
Well, they're furious, and they have been since before the information was made public. Kevin Brady, who you and I both covered for a long time, who's nobody's idea of a hothead, had a preemptory press conference before this vote was even taken. And he warned that Democrats were unleashing this dangerous new political weapon, as he described it. He and other Republicans, including the former president, have suggested that they should retaliate somehow against Democrats for taking this move. You clearly can't do that against Joe Biden because his returns are already public. You can find them on his website. You can find them on the White House website. But it's not difficult to imagine a situation in which perhaps a future Supreme Court nominee's returns are made public in this manner, or maybe Hunter Biden's are made public in this manner. Republicans are going to probably want a pound of flesh for this, and it's not clear where they're going to get it, but I think they're going to try.
Yeah, and so far Democrats' response has been transparency is great. If that happens, it happens.
Sure.
We'll see if that becomes the case if there's someone that's a political ally of theirs. Charlie, let's get back into the point that Garrett made about these foreign accounts, the fact that he was making money in foreign countries, including China. How out of the ordinary is it, and does it pose a conflict of interest for Trump during his time as president?
Well, it's wildly out of the ordinary, but of course, Trump is a wildly out of the ordinary president. Most presidents are not business moguls who have properties and businesses that are operating at all, let alone all over the world. Remember, Trump had said he would put his holdings in a blind trust, and then he didn't do that. And one of the big controversies that surrounded his finances all the time he was in office was the emoluments clause of the Constitution, which says that presidents are not supposed to take payments either from domestic or foreign sources. And he successfully fought off lawsuits trying to enforce that clause. It's not really entirely clear what it means and what the parameters of it are, but it was something the founders were worried about. And here we start to see in black and white what something like that might look like.
And Charlie, I had one tax expert explain to me that this is almost like an iceberg, right? This is just the tip of the financial picture for the former president, and kind of the devil is in the details underneath the water in terms of all of his business records. Are there investigative threads here that at least we could begin to pull? Could we learn more down the line, or have prosecutors already looked into this and there's probably not much to see here?
Well, of course, the Trump organization was convicted earlier this month of tax fraud, and Trump and his children have been civilly sued by the state attorney general of New York for fraud for things related to their financial disclosures and what they say when they're borrowing money versus reporting income and so forth. But you're right that just looking at the returns themselves, as I understand it from tax experts, is not necessarily that illuminating, because you need to marry up the numbers that are being reported to the underlying realities. But when Trump says, I had a loss of $70 million, that's just a line on the form. Where did that number come from? How does it line up to operating expenses and losses with the business associated with that number? So if you, both my colleagues who've already done some digging into Trump's taxes, and anyone else who now in the sort of hive mind that wants to scour these things, is going to need to bring additional information to the table to understand whether these numbers are real or whether there's something fishy.
Yeah, and of course, Garrett, in addition to your role on Capitol Hill, you were also covering Donald Trump's re-election bid in 2024. Does this impact his 2024 election bid, or is everybody's minds already made up when it comes to something like his taxes?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty tough sell, at least to move Republican primary voters. I mean, I think the idea of how Donald Trump does business has long since been adjudicated in the court of public opinion, at least among Republican primary voters. Now, if there's something more to this, you know, all bets are off. But I also think it'd be hard for any other Republican candidate to use this against Donald Trump, to pick up the weapon that a Democratic Congressional Committee left on the ground for you is going to open you up to more attacks from the right. It's just politically very difficult to see how this could be used against Donald Trump and cover any new ground, at least in a Republican primary.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. Garrett, Charlie, thank you to both for being here and talking about this breaking news. In other news, though, from Capitol Hill today, we learned that for the first time since the coronavirus outbreak began, the House of Representatives will be fully open when the new Congress is sworn in just a few days. The 118th Congress includes 48 new Republicans, 38 new Democrats, and according to the Washington Post, at least 12 of those freshman members have no government experience. And that includes Congressman-elect Derek Van Orden, who flipped a Democratic seat in Wisconsin that had been held by Ron Kind for 26 years. Joining me now is the Democrat from Wisconsin, Congressman Kind, who announced his retirement from Congress earlier this year. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us, and congratulations on your career in Washington. First question I have for you is, obviously a Republican is going to replace you. Are you disappointed that a Republican was able to win in your district? And do you think Democrats did enough to hold on to that seat?
Yeah, I am disappointed, mainly because the candidate on our side, Brad Pfaff, a good friend of mine, was an excellent fit for this district. No, there wasn't enough support on the outside to help get the message out, but that was the nature of the midterm election. But I'm confident the seat can be very much competitive in the future.
So to that end, let's talk a little bit about where you see the Democratic Party right now, particularly as it relates to rural voters. And I know, a big swath of your district contains rural voters. Are Democrats not doing enough to reach out to voters in districts like yours? And what can they do to change that?
The first rule in politics, Ryan, you got to show up and you got to listen and you have to be respectful. And I think the Democratic Party has room for improvement on all three fronts. I've been representing this large rural western Wisconsin district for over 26 years now. I really made an effort to show up in their communities, to sit down, to get to know them, but most importantly, to listen to the challenges that they're facing. It helps that they see that you do share some of their common values. I love to hunt. I love to fish. I grew up here in western Wisconsin like they do. And I think it's going to be important for future candidate recruitment that we find those right fits in those districts that I think can certainly be more competitive on the Democratic side.
I mean, is it possible for Democrats to win back a majority and then potentially maintain a majority if they don't make efforts to win over voters in districts like yours?
It'd be much more difficult. There will be thin majorities, which means the Congress is up for grabs and in play every 2 years, which I'm afraid might increase the polarization of the place. I mean, we have too much of that already. But listen, I think the Democratic Party has a strong message to share with rural America, with the people living there, and the various programs that we can work on together. And making that effort goes a long ways to people living in rural America.
All right, let's talk about the people in charge with making that effort. In the past, you've bucked leadership. You haven't supported Speaker Pelosi for the speakership in the past. Now we have a new generation of Democratic leaders. Hakeem Jeffries is going to become the new leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, somebody I'm sure you've worked with for a long time. You know these new leaders. What can you tell us about them, and how do you think they're going to do now that they've got an opportunity to be in control?
Well, I do know them. I've had the pleasure to serve with them. They're all very bright. They're very energetic. I think they're going to be exuding that generational change, which was, quite frankly, long overdue in the Democratic Party, certainly in Washington. I'm going to be excited to see how they fit in with their new roles. But they're also very respectful to a lot of us rural representatives, trying to find out what more we need to do to better connect in these areas. So I'm anticipating that to continue in the future.
Well, let's expand upon that a little bit, because they obviously represent diversity. Hakeem Jeffries is going to be the first African-American leader. You have Catherine Clark, Pete Aguilar, a Latino member of Congress and in leadership now. But there's not geographic diversity here. These are three leaders that come from both coasts. Are you concerned that there isn't enough geographic diversity in the leadership ranks of this incoming Democratic leadership?
Yeah, I and others have been conscious of that fact, that the Democratic Party at the national level is perceived more as an East Coast, West Coast party and not enough as far as representation in Middle America, where I'm from. And I think the party has work to do there. But we do also have some people in the upper Midwest serving in leadership right now, albeit at lower ranks, but they're still there. They're still at the table to help get that message out. But yeah, I think we need to strive for greater geographic diversity, but I've always been proud to be a member of the Democratic Party, because when I look at our caucus, I see the faces of America in it, the wide swath of the diversity that is really the sources of one of our greatest strengths. The other party views that more as a threat or a weakness, and that's one of the key distinguishing marks that we have between the two national parties today.
Let's talk about this last 2 years in Congress. Joe Biden posted a picture of the stack of bills that he signed into law. And despite kind of a rocky few months, it ended up being a pretty consequential 2 years of Congress. As you look back over your close to 30 years in Washington, where would you rank this particular session of Congress in terms of productivity?
I've never seen a more productive first 2 years of any administration in the 26 years that I've been here, which is incredibly surprising to me, given how polarized the makeup of the Congress is, but more importantly, how polarized our nation has become. The politics have been rough. certainly in recent years. And the fact that under Joe Biden's leadership, and he said he was going to do this, be respectful to the other party, find areas of common ground that we can work on together. And my goodness, he proved that it can be done still, from the Inflation Reduction Act to the CHIPS manufacturing bill, the American Rescue Plan, the toxic burn pit, the list goes on and on. But I also give him high marks in restoring key international relations. The strength of NATO is back because of our leadership and the craziness of Putin in Ukraine right now. And I hear that respect from foreign leaders that come and visit us all the time, that they need U.S. leadership. They need to strengthen these alliances. Joe Biden, to his core, believes in that we are stronger when we have friends and allies standing next to us. So from domestic to foreign policy, I give this administration a lot of credit.
But that polarization isn't gone, right? Your successor was someone that was at the Capitol on January 6th. You were inside the Capitol as the riot took place. How concerned are you about the threats to democracy? And is there a path forward where we will ever see compromise again between the two parties in Washington?
Well, hats off to the January 6th committee that really came out with the facts, the evidence to show the American people what exactly took place there, but also the warning that they've delivered that we're not out of the woods with this yet. When you have an alternate reality that's been created on the other side, perpetuated by the big lie about election fraud, that danger still lurks. And it's really incumbent upon all of us as Americans to seek what the truth is and not be led down these rabbit holes of conspiracy and misinformation and big lies being perpetrated by the ex-president, even today. And I think as long as that danger lurks, it's going to be all of our responsibility to protect these institutions of democracy and make sure we never, ever again see a day like January 6th again.
So, Congressman, I'm going to leave you with this. You're obviously going to get to spend a lot more time in Wisconsin, which I'm sure you're grateful for. But is this it? Are you done with politics? Any chance you'd run again for any office?
Well, as I say, you never say never, but my partner in all this, after 26 years, she's got a big veto power in any decision I make. Trust me.
I know how that veto power works, and you never want to try and buck it. You're certainly a man that lives up to your last name, Congressman Ron Kind. Thank you for being so kind to spend some time with us, and good luck in this next chapter of your life.
Thank you very much.
And up next, back on track, Southwest Airlines says it's back to business as usual today, promising minimal disruptions after a string of cancellations. We're on the ground with the reality check next. You're watching Meet the Press now. Welcome back. Southwest Airlines is back to a mostly normal flight schedule after an unprecedented week that left more than 15,000 flights grounded and thousands of passengers stranded. According to the website FlightAware, only 43 flights have been canceled today. That's a sharp drop-off for the more than 2,300 yesterday. But passengers are still trying to be reunited with their luggage. Many have incurred hundreds of dollars in unplanned expenses during their delays. In a letter to Southwest CEO Bob Jordan, the Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg highlighted reimbursements as a key priority for the airline. And in an interview with NBC's Blaine Alexander, Buttigieg also addressed criticisms that the Department of Transportation should have been more proactive.
Does your department share any blame in this, sir? Should you have seen this coming?
We have taken every step to increase the standard of customer service right now. Now, I can't go in and fix an IT system for an individual airline that is failing to do its job. But as a watchdog, our department is going to do everything it takes to hold them accountable for their treatment of their passengers.
And NBC's Dasha Burns joins us now from Newark Liberty International Airport for more on passenger reactions to all of this. So, Dasha, tell us what you're hearing from passengers. Are they still dealing with issues right now? And how do they feel about the information on how to get refunds, et cetera? Has it been clearly communicated to them?
Well, Ryan, for the most part today, things have been pretty quiet and smooth. Now, normally that wouldn't be a headline, but today it is because of the chaos that we've seen over the course of the last week or so. A lot of the passengers we've talked to say things are going okay so far, but there is a lot of trepidation and kind of an erosion of trust between passengers and airlines, not just Southwest, by the way, but having seen all of this chaos, watching our coverage over the last week or so, a lot of people are concerned about what's coming over the holiday weekend. You know, January January 2nd is going to be a massive travel day. So people are making backup plans. We talked to a passenger who says she's now only booking nonstop flights. She's not checking a bag because she's just terrified about what might happen. And travel experts say, you know, that's not a bad idea in this really incredibly busy time and on the heels of this really unprecedented disruption to travel, Ryan.
And you mentioned a lack of trust. Is it specifically aimed at Southwest? Are you hearing a lot of people saying they may never fly Southwest again?
Well, look, I think what happens over the next couple of weeks is Southwest is now on that next step of their flights are back to normal, but they're still trying to get bags back to people. They're still working on reimbursements. So what happens and how Southwest Airlines addresses and follows through on their promises to customers over the next couple of weeks is going to be a big test of everything that we're talking about here. And yeah, I mean, I think it's going to take a minute for people to be comfortable flying with this airline again, because you can talk about hotel reimbursements, but you know what you can't reimburse is some of those special moments over the holiday weekend that people miss with their friends and family, Ryan.
Yeah, that's right. Dasha Burns, thank you so much. We appreciate you being there. And thank you for being with us this hour. We'll see you Monday for more Meet the Press Now. And if it's Sunday, it's a special edition of Meet the Press, Democracy Disrupted, how social media is shaping our politics. Chuck has exclusive interviews with Senator Amy Klobuchar, Congressman Mike Gallagher, and the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen. Don't miss it. And from the entire Meet the Press Now family, we wish you and yours a very happy and healthy New Year.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.